The water was cold, and Lieutenant Nora Reeves's lungs were burning when Colonel Hargrove finally yanked her head up by her collar. "That's what happens to liars in my command," he spat, shoving her backward onto the latrine floor. But instead of crying or running to the Inspector General like he expected, Nora stood up, dripping and furious, and said 5 words that made the most powerful man on Camp Lejeune realize he'd just made the biggest mistake of his career. "Sir, I recorded the whole thing." 48 hours earlier, 2nd Lieutenant Nora Reeves had walked onto Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune with exactly 3 things: a commission fresh from officer candidate school, orders assigning her to the 2nd Marine Division headquarters, and a naive belief that the military was a meritocracy where hard work and integrity mattered most. 48 hours was all it took to destroy that third belief. "You're the new supply officer?" Staff Sergeant Kai Morrison looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism. At 6'2" and built like a linebacker, he made Nora's 5'4" frame feel even smaller. "You look like you should be teaching kindergarten." "I look like an officer who expects Marines to do their jobs, Staff Sergeant," Nora replied, keeping her voice level. "Shall we start with the inventory audit?" That first day set the tone. The supply warehouse was a disaster: missing equipment, falsified records, and a paper trail that led directly to Colonel Theodore Hargrove, the division's logistics officer. Nora spent 16 hours going through documents, cross-referencing serial numbers, and building a case that was impossible to ignore. Someone was stealing from the Corps, selling military equipment on the black market. And they'd been doing it for years. "Ma'am, you need to be careful," Morrison said on the second day, his earlier hostility replaced by something closer to concern. "Colonel Hargrove is connected. He's got friends in high places. People who've tried to question him before. They don't stay at Lejeune very long." "Are you saying he's corrupt?" "I'm saying he's untouchable." Morrison lowered his voice. 3 years ago, a captain found discrepancies just like these. Filed a report with the IG. 2 weeks later, that captain was reassigned to a weather station in Alaska. His career was over. Nora looked at the evidence spread across her desk. Serial numbers that didn't match. Equipment requisitions for units that didn't exist. Invoices that showed military gear being shipped to civilian addresses. "I'm not going to Alaska," she said quietly. Morrison shook his head. "With respect, ma'am, you're a brand new lieutenant. You've been here 2 days. He's a colonel with 25 years in. Who do you think they'll believe?" "They'll believe the evidence." "Will they?" Morrison's eyes held a sadness that came from experience. "I hope you're right, ma'am. I really do." That afternoon, Nora requested a meeting with Colonel Hargrove. His office was immaculate. Plaques and awards covering the walls, photographs with generals and politicians, a career's worth of accomplishments on display. Lieutenant Reeves. Hargrove didn't stand when she entered. He was 50-something, with steel gray hair and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "My staff sergeant tells me you've been asking questions about our supply procedures." "Yes, sir. I found some irregularities I thought you should be aware of." "Irregularities?" He leaned back in his chair. "You've been here, what, 2 days? And you think you found something wrong with a system that's been working perfectly for years?" "Sir, with respect, the system hasn't been working. There are missing items worth over $200,000. Equipment that's been signed out to units that don't exist. I have documentation." "Let me stop you right there, Lieutenant." Hargrove's smile vanished. "You're new. You don't understand how things work yet. Sometimes equipment gets lost. Sometimes paperwork gets misplaced. That's not corruption. That's the reality of military logistics." Nora placed a folder on his desk. "Sir, this isn't about lost equipment. This is about systematic theft. The evidence is all here." Hargrove didn't touch the folder. "You know what I think, Lieutenant? I think you're ambitious. I think you want to make a name for yourself. And I think you're willing to throw around accusations to do it." He stood, and suddenly the office felt much smaller. "Let me give you some advice. Drop this. File your reports saying everything is in order. Do your job quietly for a few months, and then you can transfer somewhere else and be someone else's problem." "I can't do that, sir." "Can't?" His voice dropped to something dangerous. "Or won't?" "Both, sir. This is theft of government property. I have a duty to report it." "Duty?" Hargrove walked around his desk until he was standing directly in front of her. "You want to talk about duty? I've served this Corps for 25 years. I've deployed 6 times. I've led Marines in combat. What have you done, Lieutenant? Spent 6 months at OCS learning to march in straight lines. My experience doesn't change the facts, sir." "Facts." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. The fact is you're a brand new lieutenant who doesn't know anything about anything. The fact is you're going to take that folder, burn it, and never speak about this again. Are we clear? Nora met his eyes. No, sir. We're not. The slap came so fast she didn't see it coming. Her head snapped to the side, ears ringing, tasting blood where her teeth had cut her lip. You will not disrespect me, Hargrove said, his voice eerily calm. Do you understand? Nora's hand went to her face. This couldn't be happening. Officers didn't hit other officers. This was assault. This was... I said, do you understand? I understand that you just assaulted a fellow officer, sir. And I'm reporting this. Hargrove's face went red. He grabbed her by the collar and dragged her out of his office, through the empty hallway. It was 1900 hours, most people had gone home, and into the nearest latrine. You want to make accusations? He shoved her toward a toilet stall. Let's see how you like this. What happened next would replay in Nora's mind for years. The cold porcelain. The water closing over her head. The burning in her lungs as she struggled. The certainty that she was going to die in a bathroom at the hands of a man who was supposed to be a leader. And then air. Hargrove yanking her up, throwing her onto the tile floor. That's what happens to liars in my command, he spat. You're going to pack your bags, request a transfer, and disappear. Because if you don't, what just happened will seem like a pleasant memory. Nora lay there, soaking wet, her uniform ruined, her face aching, her pride shattered. She should have been terrified. Should have been broken. Instead she was furious. She stood up slowly, water dripping from her hair, and looked Colonel Hargrove directly in the eyes. Sir, she said, her voice steady despite the shaking in her hands, I recorded the whole thing. Hargrove froze. What? Nora reached into her cargo pocket and pulled out her phone, sealed in a waterproof case. The screen showed a video still running, audio levels spiking with every word. I started recording when you hit me. I kept recording when you dragged me in here. And I recorded every second of what you just did. She stopped the video and backed it up to cloud storage with shaking fingers. It's already uploaded. Already sent to 3 different email addresses. You can take my phone, but it won't matter. The color drained from Hargrove's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Nora held up the phone, replayed the last 10 seconds. Hargrove's voice, crystal clear. That's what happens to liars in my command. You can't, that's not. For the first time the untouchable colonel looked uncertain. I can and I did. Nora moved toward the door, giving him a wide berth. You were right about one thing, sir. I am ambitious. But not for rank or glory. I'm ambitious about doing the right thing. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. If you release that. When I release it, Nora corrected. To the Inspector General. To the Judge Advocate General. To every news outlet that will listen if the military tries to cover this up. She paused at the door. You said people who've challenged you don't stay at Lejeune very long. You're right. But I'm not going to Alaska, sir. You are. Or maybe Leavenworth, depending on how the courts-martial goes. She walked out of the latrine, through the empty hallway, and straight to the Provost Marshal's office. 3 weeks later, Nora sat in a conference room at division headquarters with the Inspector General, 2 attorneys from JAG, and a representative from the Marine Corps Criminal Investigation Division. The video had done exactly what she'd known it would. Opened doors. Forced investigations. Made the untouchable very, very touchable. Colonel Hargrove was in pretrial confinement, facing charges of assault, theft of government property, conduct unbecoming an officer, and a dozen other violations. The supply scandal had unraveled completely, $2 million in stolen equipment over 5 years, with evidence linking Hargrove to a civilian smuggling operation. Lieutenant Reeves, the IG said, your testimony and evidence have been invaluable. The Corps owes you a debt of gratitude. Nora nodded but said nothing. Gratitude felt hollow when she still woke up with nightmares about cold water closing over her head. We understand you've requested a transfer, the IG continued. Yes, sir. I think it's best. Where are you thinking? Quantico, sir. I've applied to the Criminal Investigation Division. Figured if I'm going to make enemies anyway, might as well make a career out of it. The IG smiled. Your application is approved. You start in 2 weeks. He stood and everyone else followed. Lieutenant, what you did took extraordinary courage. Most people would have let this go. Stayed quiet. Played it safe. With respect, sir, that's not why I joined the Corps. No, he agreed. It's not. Which is exactly why we need more officers like you. After they left, Nora sat alone in the conference room, looking out at the base where she'd spent the worst 3 weeks of her life. Staff Sergeant Morrison had been right. Challenging power was dangerous. It came with costs. But staying silent had costs too. And Nora had decided, somewhere between the first slap and the cold toilet water, that she could live with being unpopular. She could live with being transferred, with making enemies, with having a reputation as a troublemaker. What she couldn't live with was being complicit. Her phone buzzed. A text from Morrison. Asterisk, heard the news about your transfer. You'll do great things, ma'am. The Corps needs people who won't back down. Asterisk. Nora smiled, typed back. Asterisk, the Corps needs people who won't let the bad guys win. See you around, Staff Sergeant. Asterisk. She stood, squared her shoulders, and walked out into the North Carolina sunshine. Somewhere in a confinement cell, Colonel Hargrove was learning that power without integrity was just tyranny waiting to fall. And Second Lieutenant Nora Reeves, all 5'4" of her, had proven that sometimes the smallest person in the room could cast the longest shadow, as long as they refused to be silent in the darkness.